Okay, so good afternoon, guys. Welcome to another class. So we're going to be continuing from where we stopped. We're building a quiz application called Quiztail, and we've been able to do a bit of setup, project structure, and set up the welcome screen, the splash screen, and a few other things. So today we'll continue, and hopefully we're able to build this out today. So first of all, we're going to be setting up the model, and then we'll get to talk about controllers and then bindings, and then of course see if we can build out the design screen as quickly as possible and implement other functionalities, right? So just to recap, of course, we are using the GetX state management, right? So yeah, let's actually start. So like I said, the first thing is this: we are building a quiz application, right? And one of the things you need to first of all understand is what you're building, because you need to create a model. Now, a model in the context of Flutter is just a way of structuring data that the application will work with. Okay, so what is this model? What are we working with? We are building a quiz application. So what we are working with is a question, right? Now, but what does a question look like rather? Okay, so that's the whole concept of a model. It's just a way to structure what your data. A typical example is you as a human being. You're a model. So think of it when you get. Let's look at the word model from Let's leave coding, right? You know of cars, right? A particular brand that say has this model, that model, right? Basically, the concept of model there is this: it has a different what structure. Okay, so a model is just a way of structuring your data. So if you want to, for example, build a car, right, what you can create a model, and it is that model that just kind of gives you an information of how the car should be made and what the car should be able to do. Okay, so we are working with questions. Questions is what we are working with. Of course, it's a quiz. So you get a question, you give an answer. So what we now need to ask ourselves is, what does our question model look like, or what should it look like, right? So I'm going to go to my data folder, and we're going to create, okay, so before that, I think, we were, okay, I think we created a new branch, if I'm not mistaken. So let me just be sure, because I want us to have this branch. So we had main, we had the splash screen, and then we had the game screen. Okay, so we are currently in the game screen, and I don't think we have done anything. So, but for now, we don't. I'm not sure we're going to. Let's not call this game screen, because I also want you to learn. When you're actually, because you're going to work as a team. You're going to work on different aspects of your application, different features. So you need to know how to separate concerns. One of the things you will learn, especially during your project phase, should you get there, is that you don't have to pack in a lot of features in one PR, right? What we call pull request. I think I explained that. So your branch should just focus on accomplishing one thing. It makes reviewing your code easier, right? Unlike having like thousand and something lines of code. It's break it into chunks. So what we're going to be doing majorly before we get into the UI is kind of like a model setup, setting up the model and controller, right? So I can just, let me rename this branch. I think git branch dash B, I think that should be to rename. So let's call it FT model. Okay, let me use, or let me just say setup, right? I'll just call it this. Okay, I think I got that wrong. So let's see. Okay, dash M. So you can see that here. Yes, dash M. Use that to rename a branch. So I'm going to do sorry, that should be dash m, yeah, git branch dash m, yeah. So okay, yeah, ft setup. Okay, that's fine. So let's close this out. So we'll rename that branch. So let's go to our data folder, and I'm going to create a file, call it question model, question underscore model dot dart. So what does our question model look like? Like, what does the structure look like? So a question, so how do you create a model? A model is basically just a class. So just think of it as you creating a class that some another class can inherit from, right? So class, I'll call it question model. So let's define the properties of this what class. I'm going to say final ID. So a question should have an ID, right? So that's a way of identifying it. And a question should also, in our own context, a question should have an answer. So we're going to be displaying options, options 1, 2, 3, 4. So whatever option you choose, right? We should get to that. That's what the answer will be, the content of that option, right? So if you choose B, or if you choose option 3, right, that is the answer. So we're going to associate the answer with an integer. So I can do this. I can decide to do final int this. I can decide to also do final int answer, right? Which is okay, but you can just also merge this since both of them. So this is basically we declaring two, properties, but they have the same, data type, right? Now, another property of a question is that, of course, it should have a question, and the question should, of course, should be of type string. So call it question. Another property of a question is that it should have options, right? Of course, if there's going to be an answer, you're going to give options, right? We're not doing essay, right? Okay, so and the options is a list because it's more than one. So I'll say final list, and I'll just explicitly declare that this list should be a type of string, and I'll call it what? Options. Okay, so when I'm done with this, of course, we get this error that says the final variable ID must be initialized. That would, of course, when you create a variable, you should initialize it, but we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to create a constructor for these final what fields. So just by what I did there, just hover on it, quick fix, and then you can see create constructor for final what fields. So what this means here, with this constructor, it means that when I call this question model, you can see I have this keyword called required. I must give it an ID. I must give it an answer. I must give it a question, and I must give it options, right? So let me just arrange that. So this is basically just a simple model, right? And this is what our model should actually look like. Okay, so let's move on. Now, another thing you get to also do is, of course, in the previous task, I see you guys did it. Of course, I didn't really talk much because I wanted us to take things one step at a time. Now, when you are building your applications, we do what is called separation of concern, right? There's what we call the MVC and MVVM. We'll talk about that much later. But the concept is this: there should be a separation of concern. Your UI should contain only UI related stuff. Your logic should be separate. So you should not have functions, you should not have methods, right, in your UI class. And what's your UI class? A typical example is this splash screen, right? This is your UI. So you shouldn't have methods here in this same class. This class should just focus on what UI, your widgets, right? Your stateless widgets, your stateful. It should just have your UI. Your logic and everything should be in another class. Now we are working with GetX, so that is where the GetX controller comes in, right? So we're going to be building a controller class that will hold every method, function, reusable variables that we're going to need to update the UI. So it's going to be separate. We're not keeping them together. Okay, it's going to be in a separate file. That kind of makes things a bit much cleaner, and of course, it also makes your code testable, right? Hopefully, before the end of our classes, right, I'll just brush you guys up on testing in Flutter. So let's create the controller class and see what we can have there. Of course, this is with respect to what we are building. So we already have a Splash controller, which I have actually showed you. So we're just going to use the same folder. I'm going to create the question controller .dart. So just like we did in our Splash controller, it had the logic that we actually needed. The method to move to the welcome screen, to call this function and that. So in our question controller, so we're going to say class question controller, and then it will extend GetX controller. So of course, with the GetX controller, we have a lot. I'm going to do a deep dive, right, in the coming classes. So let's set up a few things, right, that we're going to need. First of all, we're going to need a name. Now, if you look at our UI, it is welcome to the quick style, choose username, right? Now, another thing is you can actually have one controller class that can serve two or more classes. So this our question controller is going to serve our welcome screen and our game screen. The Splash controller only serves the splash screen, okay? But we're going to use one controller to serve two screens, right? And that's also show you that that's possible. You can use two or more. So looking at this, we're going to choose a username, and the way our design is, when you click on Let's Start, on the game screen, whatever username you type, right, even on the success screen, right, you should see that. So it means that we need to pass the name to other screens. So this means that you need to be able to hold the username, right? So I'm going to create a variable string. I'll just say name, and by default, I'm just going to give it an empty string for now, right? Okay, so what else are we going to set up? Let's of course, based on our design, I think I thought I pulled that up. We're going to have a question count because we want to know how many times that how many questions has been answered, right? So let's set that up. Let me say before then, let's create a list of our questions. Let's get our questions, right? Let's get our questions first before that. So our questions is a list, right? It's going to be a list because it's more than one questions. And what's it a list of? It's not a list of strings. It's not a list of whatever. It's a list of questions, right? It's a list of questions. Now, because it's a list of questions, the data type we'll pass is our model, right? Our model, because that is how a question, it holds the structure of how a question should look like. So question model, right? So let me check just to be sure. Okay, I got the spelling right. Okay, so we just need to, yeah, we're good. And then we're going to, let's call it question list. So we need to import this. Okay, so question list is just a list of questions. So I'm going to use this. Let me just close this out, right? So let's create some questions. So we're going to create some dummy data. Of course, I'll teach you guys not how to fetch, data online, pass it to your model and all that. So, but for now, we're just going to do dummy data. So let's create a question model. So remember, a question model should have all this. A question should have this. This is the structure. This is what makes up a question, right? So I think I created just a few, so I would just let me see if I can get that from my notepad, so we don't actually have to start typing a lot of things, right? So let me just paste this here. Okay, save that. Okay, good. So these are question model. It has an ID. So this is the question. So here we're saying the answer is 2. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so these are question model. So we just have 3, right? Of course, you can add more to the mix, right? If you want, you can add more to it. Okay, so what else do we need, right? What else do we need? Let's we need a variable, right, to hold this list. Now, what we did here, right? What we actually did here, if you look at this, of course, whenever you name a field or a variable, right, with the on.
I can't hear you, sir.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that break in transmission. Okay, so as I was saying, right, we've created a list of questions, right? But of course, this is private. The reason is because we don't want to be able to manipulate this list from the outside, right? So we're going to create a variable that is exposed, the one that we can reference. Okay, so what I'm just going to do, I'm going to use what we call a getter, right? So I'm just going to say um, lists of question model, right? And I'm going to use the keyword get, right? So get question list. So this one doesn't have an underscore, right? So get question lists. Okay, so I think I'm putting this in the wrong place, right? Shouldn't be inside of this. Yeah, outside of this list. Yeah. Okay, so we want to get the list, and the content of the list, right? We want to get the list and its what content. So I'm going to use this convention, right? Where's my cursor? Questions what lists. Okay, so yeah, I think we'll just work with this. So this would actually what give us the list, right? And of course, any other thing that is being added. So let's add a few more things that we're going to need, right? Like we need to check if the option has been pressed, right? If the user has actually clicked on an option, right? And we need all these things is because we need to check the states. So we need to be, we need to create some variables, something to hold, a value and all that. So one thing I'm going to create is a method called isPressed. So I'm just showing you this concept, the whole concept of hiding the variables that has the actual value, right? And then exposing the ones that should be accessible. I'm just going to teach you this concept because you use it, not because you can't just create a direct stuff, right? So I'm going to say I'm going to pass in false, right? And then I need to now, kind of create a getter. So we'll get is pressed. So this will be without the and then I'll just pass in the is pressed. So whatever the value is, so this variable is now what we can access, right? We actually saw this when we what's it called, when we looked at classes and all that. So you can see that why it sees this as a private what field, and it says you can also actually just make it final, right? And that would also be also good. Now let's move on. Now we need to know the number of questions, right? We need to know the number of questions. So I'm going to use a double for that, double data type, number of questions, because we're going to need all this, right? Number of questions. So by default, I'm just going to give one, right? And then let's get that number of questions. Get the number of questions. Number of questions. Okay. So let's make this final. Okay, so what else? So we need, of course, we also need to know the selected answer, right? The answer that the user actually selects. We need to know. Remember, our selected answer is an integer, right? So let's so I'm going to say int selected answer, and I'm going to make this one nullable, right? Because it's possible the user doesn't select anything, right? One of the things you cannot predict is how users interact with your applications. You can try, but of course, some persons may not click anything and they just, press submit, right? So we need to cater for that, because when they click nothing and they press submit, submission is going to expect an answer. So it's possible they don't give one and yet they want to submit. So think of it as somebody submitting a question without an answer, submitting their answer sheet empty, right? Just think of it that way. So so selected answer. So I'm not going to so let's call it, let's say final. So I'm not going to give it anything, right? I'm not going to give it anything. Let me say int get selected answer. So you should get it from the selected answer. Okay, so okay, so I think I'll just take this final, because we use a final here because it's nullable, we must give it a value. So after selected answer, we should have correct answer, because just because it's selected doesn't actually mean it is correct. You understand? Just because it's selected doesn't actually mean it's correct. So I'm just going to change this to correct answer. Okay. So I'm going to just change this to correct answer, and then we can also do the same thing. Okay, so yep, this, okay. So that's that. Let's also just do a count of the correct answers, because we need to know what your score is, right? So we need to know what the person's score is after the game. So at first it's 0, right? So int gets count of correct answers. So that should be count. Sorry, not an assignment, it's a function. Count of correct answers. Okay, and we can make this final from the suggestion, and we're good. Okay, so now another thing we need to do, we need to check if the question has actually been answered, right? We can also do a check to see if the question has been answered. Now, to do that, we are going to actually use a map, right? We're going to use a map. I think we learned about map. So I'm going to just say map with a key of int, value of bool, right? So want to map, to check if the question is answered, right? I'm just going to leave this as an empty map for now, right? Let's just leave this as an empty map for now. So this is just a map to check if the question has been answered. So we'll provide a key, which could be 1, 2, 3, 4, right, dependent, or the ID, and then of course we'll get the value to know if that question has been answered or not. Now this app actually uses a timer, right? So I'm going to set up a timer, just initialize it, or declare it rather. Okay. Copilot, don't need to import anything. Let me see. Yeah, I need to import something. Okay, so timer, let's do now the maximum second you should have to answer a question. Let's give it 15 or 10. Let's do 10. And then for the seconds, right? We're also going, that's maximum seconds. I'm also going to do because we need to be observing, we need to observe. So of course in GetX has what we call an observer, right? It has what we can create an observer variable. Basically what an observer variable does is that it can listen for changes, so that once that variable is updated, right, the UI is going to also be updated. So yeah, we have a lot. We have the Rx int, Rx string, right, Rx bool, right, dependent on what the type is. So here is we're going to use the Rx int, and it's just for the second. Let me also give it 10.obx. You see how we're going to use that. But let me get this, which is Rx int. So I'm just going to interchange. Like I said, these are conventions. So I think I need to import get. Hold on. Okay. Hope I spelled that well. Yeah, I think I'm missing an import. So I need to import what's it called? Get should actually do it still. Get should actually do it. So just let's see. Okay. Okay, let me try something. Yeah, that doesn't work either. So, okay, well, another thing I can just do, right? Sorry, let me use this other approach. Just this is also fine. I can just say, yeah, we can just let's just use this pattern, right? You can also just do this. So this makes you can see this RX int here by default. This OBX returns an RX int. So we can actually just go this route, okay? Okay, so I think we'll probably just, yeah, these are just default stuff to declare. So now let's look at some methods, right? Let's look at some, methods. So some of the methods we need to check is the score results. We need to check the answer that the person has actually given, right? We also need to check if the question has been answered. We need to, we need a method that will take it to the next question, right? After the first one, based on the timer. We need to be able to reset, the answer, like more like you want to start the quiz again, right? And a lot of other stuff that we'll do, starting the timer and all that. So let's start with the timer. Let's just set up some functions, right? So, and these functions, we're going to now call them in the UI. So we're not declaring them in the UI. So let's call this start timer. I'm going to try to be a bit fast, right? I'm going to try to be a bit fast. So please just bear with me. So to start a timer, right? Of course, first of all, you may be in the process of, a game already. So the first thing, you actually need to reset the timer, right? It makes sense to reset the timer just in case, it's already running, but we don't have a method for that yet. So I'm just going to, let's just create a method there, and we'll get to it, right? Resetting the timer is just easy, actually. So I don't need this. I can just choose this guy because it's just one line of code. So to reset it, I'm just going to take the second, right, dot value. So whenever using OBX, to get the value there, you use the dot value. That will give you the value of that observable variable. So I'm now going to pass in. So I'm just going to reset it to the max sec. So what does this mean? So if, for example, if the sec here, the seconds, maybe it has even gone down to 8 or 7, right? Resetting the timer means take it back to 10 because the maximum seconds here is what? Is 10. So take it back to 10. That's just what that reset timer is going to do. Okay, so what we now do is, so to reset the timer, we get our timer object, right? This is already an inbuilt class. The timer class here is a countdown timer that can be configured to fire once or repeatedly. It counts down from the specified duration to 0, right? So when the timer reaches 0, the timer invokes the specified callback function. So let's do that. So I'm going to say timer dot, I'm going to use periodic. Now for the duration, it takes a duration. So you can see it takes a duration. The type is a duration. So it means that we need a duration. So I'm going to say const duration. And duration itself takes days, hours, minutes, seconds. So I'm going to use seconds. And I'm just going to say 1. So you kind of like have a 1 second. The timer is just, so it will be 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and the likes. Now, and then of course, it requires a callback function. Remember when we hovered on this, it says when it gets to 0, it invokes a callback function. So we need to set up that function. And when you hover on it, you can see on this duration here, the periodic, you can see duration and a void function with that callback of so this creates a new repeating timer. So let's I'm just going to declare that I can do control space, and you can see control space just helps you to bring up the suggestion here. So I'm going to take the second one because we have some things to check. So we're going to use the timer instance here, right? And then I'm going to just do a check. I would say if the second, right, if the value of it, remember it's an observable variable, so I have to do dot value. So if it is greater than 0, right? Remember what we want to do. We want to start the timer. So we'll reset it first, and then we'll check if the second is greater than 0. What do we do? We'll decrease it. If it's greater than 0, we need to be decreasing because it's a countdown, right? So what we'll do is seg the seg dot value, right, minus minus, and that solves it, right? So what this is just going to do is just like it's going to subtract 1 from whatever is inside there, and that's just like you have plus plus, right? So this is the same thing as saying seg dot value. You're assigning seg. So this is the same thing as saying this, right? It's the same thing as saying seg dot value minus 1. It's the same. It's the same thing, right? But this is just shorter, right? This is just shorter. So if it's greater than 0, decrement it, right? Remove 1 from it. Else, what do we want to do? Else, we need to stop the timer, right? We'll create a function for that. So we need to stop the timer, right? We'll create a method for that now. Let me just, okay. Else we stop the timer, and then of course when the timer stops, we need to go to the next question. Of course, you know how that's how quiz works. So we need to go to the next question. So that's going to also be a method, right? And we'll define what it should do, right? Create method for that also, and then just close this out. So we have our start timer function, we have our reset timer. Now let's do our stop timer. So our stop timer is actually very simple. So I'm just going to use this and say timer dot cancel. Yeah, I think should be oh, let me see. Yeah, should be that. The method can't be unconditional because the receiver can be null. Okay, so because it can be null, right? So sometimes I like to just use this to be sure. Okay, so that's just because it can be null, so that's fine. So that's that. Now, what do we need to do? We need to work on the next question, right? Let's work on the next question. So how can we get the next question, right? How can we get the next question? So there are a lot of things that is going to be involved. So let me just push up a bit. Let's take a step back, because for the next question, from our UI, we kind of need to switch. The UI needs to move. We need to see a new set of questions. So that involves what we call what we're going to be using, and I'll set that up later on. It's like a page controller. So, but before then, let's see what else can we just do that I probably don't have to get into UI right now. Okay, we can check for score results. That shouldn't stick. So can check for score results. Yeah, let's check for score results. So the score result, how do we get the score results, right? Basically, you have to check the correct answers, right? And then do some, what's it called? Calculations, right? So let's say I have, let me just create this getter here. I'll call it score results. Create this function, get the score results. And what I'm going to be returning, right, in this getter is, I'm going to say the count of the correct answers, right? So we kind of want to get it in a percentage way now. So count of correct answers, of course, you have to multiply by 100, right? And then divided by the number of questions, right? And the number of questions, we get it by the question list dot length. Yeah. So this is to get the score results. This gives us the score result actually, right? Yeah, that's pretty much there. Then we can also check and answer. Yeah, let's do that. Let's create a method to check the answer. We need to know if the answer is correct. So check answer. So to check an answer, we need two things. We need the question, right, and the answer, right? So I'm going to say it's going to take a question model. Of course, that's the type there, just like it would say string. And then it's going to take the what selected answer, which is an int, right? Selected answer. Now, so first of all, before we check the selected answer, we need to be sure that is pressed is what true. So is pressed, we now change the value of is pressed to true, right? Or I think we created, did we? Because we need to check that it is pressed. I thought we, yeah, this is it now. Yes. So now if you notice, right, I did is pressed. This is this guy, and you can see there isn't a setter for this, right? So let's see. Can't use this because it is final. Yeah, so we need to change this because final means we can change that. So let's just leave this at full. Yeah, so you can see we are updating the private variable, which in turn updates the what variable that is what accessible, which is this particular one. Okay, so we switch it to true, means you've pressed it. Of course, check and answer means is pressed now becomes true. And then our selected answer, right, which we created, this private variable, which is an int, we're going to now take in, of course, this check answer, we're going to pass in whatever the user selects. So whatever the user selects, we update this. So update this here, right? Also, we'll do that for correct answer, right? So the correct answer, we can get that from the model. So which is our question model dot what answer, right? That will give us the answer. So now what we'll do is to compare. So I'm going to say if correct Okay, so just to run that again, right? So our method checks an answer, right? So we have to be passing the question model because we need to get the answer, right? We'll use the object to get the answer, and then you also need to pass in the selected answer, what the user actually was selected, okay? And then, of course, we're checking if is pressed is true. We change that, not really check. So it's more like you're changing the value because we set it to false. And then of course we update our selected answer, update the correct answer. So now we're checking if the correct answer and the selected answers, if it is true, if they are the same rather, we increase the count of correct answers, right? Because we've already had this variable there. Now, so of course, after checking an answer and it is true, right? The answer is right. What do you do? So what we'll just do is to stop the timer because we don't need, if you've already gotten the answer, right? I don't need to start waiting for the timer to complete. Maybe I answered it in less than 1 second or maybe in 2 seconds. And let's say each question we have 10. So I don't have to wait for it to finish its counts down, right? So I'll just stop the timer, right? And then just, kind of move on to the next thing. So that's why we have the stop timer. So after stopping the timer, we're going to do something. So I'm going to say the question is answered, right? Remember, this is a map, right, that we created, and we want to check if that question has been answered. That's basically what we're doing. So what we're going to now do is, after stopping the timer, we check if it has been answered. And if it has been answered, we're going to update the map. So I'm going to say, question is answered dot update, right? Question is answered dot what update. So what it does is to update the value for the provided key. So it will return the new value that is associated with that. So what the want to update is the ID. So say question model dot ID, right? And then the update here, right, is actually what? A condition, a bool condition, right? So I'm going to now set that to be true. I'm just going to, you can just do control space to help you, and then the value now is what? True. So this means that this question has been what? Answered. So we are just updating that. Okay. So after updating it, we're just going to do, we need to move to the next question, right? We need to move to the next question. But of course, let's just do a bit of a delay, right? We don't need to be very, very quick about it. So I'm just going to say future.delayed, because we want to kind of delay a bit. We need to pass in a duration, which of course should be a const. So duration. So I'm going to use milliseconds, right? A bit more faster, 500 milliseconds, right? So after that, what do we want to do? So after this 500 milliseconds delay, then, right, we want to what? Do something. We're registering a callback, right? A function, something that needs to what? Happen after this 5 seconds delay. So after this 5 second delay, what I want to do is to go to the next question. So value, I'm just going to say next question, right? Next question, what? Method. So after that, go to the next question, and then I'm going to call update in this function. So basically, what this this update method does, of course, in GetX, right, is it will rebuild this get builder. It's just going to rebuild your what's it called? Your values and everything, which will in turn actually what notify the widgets that okay, something has changed, right? And then they get to what adjust to that what change. Okay, so that's actually how you check the answer. Now you can also check if the question has been answered. That's different. This checking an answer means that the user has selected, but you can also check if the question has been answered. This is in case someone just wants to kind of click next when they haven't actually answered the question. So in such a case, right, since it's a check, right, so we're going to return a true or false since it's a check. So I'll say check is question answered. So if you notice how I create my variable names, right? If something that requires true or false, it also sounds like a question, okay? Or something that should return true or false. So to check, we actually need an ID, right? We need an ID, and the ID is the question's ID, question ID. So once we have that, since we are returning a bool here, this is a function that returns a boolean. So return, we'll check our question is answered, right? Remember, it's a map, so we'll check it. So we need to iterate through the map and check which of them have been what answered, right? We need to check if that ID has actually been answered in that particular question. So how we're going to do that is, so since it's a map, I'll use the dot entries because I need to iterate, through, the map. So I get the entries dot first, where the element, so of course this is using test, but I think it makes sense to, yeah, element. So where the element, and then the element key, element dot key, so that will give us the key, is equal to the question ID. So where it is actually this, give me the value. That's just it. So what are we doing here? So we're iterating through the map, and we call the first where. So the first where is more like, of course, just from the line, the first element that satisfy the given predicate, which is the test, right? So this is just a value. It can be anything. This is just, so just think that, when you're doing your for loop, you say for I equals 0, I less than this and that. So this is just something to iterate through. So we use this to now get the key, and we compare if it is equal to the question ID. Let's say we are the second question. I want to check if the question number 2 has been answered. So passing 2 is the ID. So it checks. If it matches, then it returns the value. And remember, the value is either true or false, right? So it will return the value to us. So that's how to check if the question, has been answered. So a few things. I don't think we have. So we still have the next question, right? So I'm going to hold on this particular function because we need to touch our. We need to actually do our UI. So before then, let's. Okay, I think we can also do, because yeah, let's reset answer. Let's create a method called reset answer. What this basically do, just going to say for var element in our question list, right? We want to take want to update this question is answered, right? Dot add all. And what we're going to add is we need the element. So I think I'm going to just say elements dot ID false, yeah. Just to false. Okay. Yeah, then let me update. Okay, so we're going to reset, just to kind of like, we're going to reset the answer. So what I'm going to do is we'll go through the question list, right? And then we're just going to add every, anyone that actually has not been answered. We're just kind of going to add all of them. Everyone that has a false, this thing, we'll kind of just reset it. So a false value, right? So there are a few other things, right? But let's just okay, I think let me just add one more. Then let's see if we can get to the UI. Hopefully we should be able to. So this is just to restart the game, to start the game again. So if we want to start the game again, probably after the user is done playing the first round, so we have to reset things. Things needs to go back to default. Correct answer, for example, needs to go back to, it needs to be, you can just set it to null, right? It's nullable, so we can set it to null. The count of the correct answers, right? Set that back to 0, right? We'll also reset the answer. Everything should have a value of false. That's why we did this here, to reset the answer. So every question will now have a value of false, meaning it has not been answered. Okay, and then select answer will also be null. So this is just us resetting stuff. And then after that, we now get dots. So we need to move out of that, the last screen, which is going to be like the game status screen, which is what we have. So we're going to use get off all, and then we're going to use the get off all named. So we're going to go into routing, right? We're going to go into routing. So before, you were using navigation dot pop dot push named and all that, but I told you, of course, with GetX, navigation is actually what's easy. So we want to go from the welcomes, we want to go to the welcome screen, right? But we need to use a routing now. We need to use a named route. So we want to identify them by a name. Each route should be identified by its name. Okay, so that's what we are going to that's what we're going to just work on now. So so how do we do that? I'll just create a, let's create a so there are a lot of ways to do this, right? Let's just use, let me create a, let me create a folder called routes. So I'm going to say routes.dart. Okay, so class, I'm going to call this routes, right? Now, what is going to be in these routes? I'm going to say static const. Now, how many screens do we have? So welcome. So I'm going to call this welcome screen routes, right? And this is how we're going to name the routes. We're going to use this and say, I'll just call it welcome screen. So this is the name. This should now be the name of, you know, this should be the name of the what welcome screen routes, right? We can do that for the splash, right? I don't think we'll go there, but let's just do for game screen routes. That's for game screen, and game status routes, which is for the game status screen. Okay, so we have our routes, right? We have our routes now. So let's go to our main function. I think we talked about another thing I will introduce you to is bindings, right? Because there's what we call dependency injection. I think I talked about that when we were talking about GetX. So it's just a way of making sure that anything we actually need to make a particular class function properly is made available and on time, right? And in a more efficient way. That's just kind of like a way to summarily, just put that, okay? So let me just create a file here before we get into, I'll call it bindings.dart. So in our bindings.dart, everything, every dependency that we need, we kind of just initialize it there. And how you do that, you just say, let me create a class, call it my bindings. I'm just going to call it my bindings, and it will implement bindings, right? Okay, so we have to override a particular method called what? Dependencies, right? So, and we use the get here dot lazy put, right? And then what we want to put in is every of our controller, right? We can just put it here. Everything that our application actually needs. So I can just pass in this here. Okay, so we need to import this actually. Don't we have a, okay, we called it question controller. Let's see. Okay. So I can also just put a splash controller, right? Okay, so that's just our bindings, right? So we'll go to our main.dart, and that's where we're going to now initialize these guys. So we already have this main.dart here. Okay, so what did we do? Okay, we just have only my app running here. And then, okay, so this is where we have our get material app. Okay, so let's initial binding, right? So our initial binding, I'm just going to call our my binding class. So that solves that, right? So the constructor is being called in, isn't a const. Okay, so we need to take out this. Yeah. Okay, so that's our binding. Then Flutter now has, of course, GetX has the word get pages. So it will just get the list of pages that are available that needs to be displayed. So here, what I will just do is say, use the get page. So it's used to get a page, just like the name implies. Get what? Page, right? And then you have to give it the name and then the page that it should go to, right? The name and the page that it should actually go to, and the name is just a string. So for the welcome, I'm going to say routes class, our routes. I need to be sure to, sometimes you need to be sure ahead. So we have the route dot, let's say the welcome, right? This will just give us back the string there, right? And what page do we want to go to? So the page here requires a widget function, So which is, I'm just going to do this and then returns the welcome screen. So these are, that's actually that, right? So we have about two things. We can actually just use routing. We have the game status route, which should take us to the game status screen. And then we have the game screen route, which should take us to the game screen. So that's actually that, right? Just add this here because I'm sure it's shouting and it needs it. So just make it const for performance sake. Okay, so that's basically what routing, right? So we can move from one screen, to another. Okay, so here what we're now going to do is when we want to start again, right? We want to get off all named, right? So what what name is that? We just need to pass in the name. So I'll say route dot, we need to go to, let's go back to the welcome screen, right? Which is this, right? The person wants to change his or her username, right? Okay, I'm just going to save and sync that. So I think we can just stop here for now. Right, let's see if we can quickly, well, I think this may actually span into the next class, but let's see if we can, let's see if we can just do the work on the UI. So we were supposed to work on the game screen, right? So let's just do that quickly. I'm going to be very, very, very fast with this. I'm going to be very, very fast with this. So, but I don't think we've finished. Let's check. This is our welcome screen. Okay, so no, we did not finish this welcome screen. I can still see that it is empty here. So let's actually just work this out. So first of all, I'm just going to change this to this just preference. I'm going to change this to a stateful widget. Let's convert this to a stateful widget. Now, what do we want to do? Okay, we already have this username and the let's start. So from here, we need to go to the actual game mode screen. So we use the text field here, which is for this, right? This was just because we're trying to kind of run up the design quickly. But let's update it because we need to do some validations and check. So instead of just a text field, I'm going to use a form, and I'm going to use a text form field also. So let's create a form because we need the form functionality for validation, to be able to do some validation. Okay, so the form, you need to also give it a form key. It needs a key, right? It needs a key. So we're just going to go create that, above. So just before this override, I'm going to say final global key, right? We take global key. We want to create a global key, right? So this is of type global key, and it takes a form state, and then I'll call it form key. I'll use an underscore because it should just reside here. So I'm basically just creating an instance, right? So this is what we're going to use. So I'm going to pass that here. Invalid const value, something is const here. Yeah, the column. So let's take out that. Maybe we can just, okay, so for the child, we're going to use, now this is me going to introduce you to, the GetX and the power of GetX. So we need to listen to changes in this input field, right? We need to listen to changes in this input field. So there are two ways, right? For the whole reactivity in GetX, we have the OBS, using the OBX widget, which we'll use, and we also have using the Get Builder, which we will use, right? So let's start with the Get Builder. Now, the Get Builder is actually a widget also. So I'm going to say Get Builder, Get Builder package, which extends GetX controller. It also extends a stateful widget, right? So with the GetX builder provides you with with access to your controller, which holds your logic, right? So in our case, it's our question controller, so we can pass it there, right? And then we need to give it a builder, right? And a lot of other things. So, but let me just open this. First of all, it has an init function, right? So this is going to initialize our controller, right? It will initialize this, and that is why we set up binding, right? So that binding provides our controller, at the point where it's needed, right? It initializes it. So with that, usually we can use what we say get.put. So get.put would actually means, I want to inject this controller class. I want to inject it. I want to put it in so that I can make use of that, create an object and make use of it to access whatever methods are available, right? But when you actually initialize it early using bindings, we don't need to use get.put. We use get.find because it has already been initialized, but it's just waiting to, be used. So I'm going to say get.find, and you have to be specific what you're looking for, which is the question controller. So this is going to just initialize it for us, right? And then, of course, it takes a builder. So a builder which uses a controller instance, right? Now I'm going to use this. So this controller now is of type question controller, okay? So we're going to use the text form field. So we're going to use that to be builder to build the text form field. So text form field needs a controller, a text editing controller, which you are aware of, right? So we just need to create a controller. Now, we can use, since we're using the question controller, right? So we don't need to create that variable here. In fact, this form state, we can just leave it here, but every item we can move it. So I can create this controller in this place. I can say, let's say var name controller. Okay, name controller, text editing controller. Okay, so right, and then what I can just do is to pass in this controller. I have my we created a this controller object here, so I can just say controller dot, and I have access to the name controller, right? So that's just that. So you don't have to define it in this particular class. So let's see. Let's do decoration. we're in the text form field now. So decoration. So I refreshed. That's why you can see question controller not found. It says you need to call get.whatPut or get.lazyPut. We have not rebuilt the application, so that's why. So let's just rebuild, right? So that the bindings and everything can, just take effect. Okay, so let's do a hot restart. Okay. Yeah, good. So these are text form fields. So let's do some decoration on it quickly. Inputs decoration. So we'll use the inputs decoration. Now the inputs decoration, just save that. We have some stuff we can do like the border. Let's use the outline input border, right? Which a border side, let's say border side with a width of 2, right? And then the border radius can be I can just use border radius on all, which takes a, so for everywhere, right? And then this takes a radius, so radius dot circular, and let's say 16. I think maybe that might be much, but well, let's just save that and see what we have. Yeah, it's much. Sorry about that. Let's just do 8. Okay, I think that's better. When I click on that, okay. Okay, so yeah, work in progress. Okay, so our border radius stops here. Okay. I think that's fine for decoration. I don't let me see if I can fast track things, right? So for a validator, right, we can call we have some validations here, right? We had some validations that we created. Which one can we use? So this is let's just check for empty text. Let's just check for empty text. I don't know if we can. Because validator, let's see. It takes a string function. Okay. Let's import this. I hope we can use this. Create a getter. So hold on. Did we? Okay, app validator. Okay. Okay, don't know. This should give us valid empty text. So these are valid empty text takes 2 variables. Our validator actually needs just 1. Right? So it needs just 1. So I say the argument string can't be assigned to this. So let's just modify this one. Let's just modify this. Let's just say name for now. Let's just say name is required. Okay, so I hope this okay, so okay, I think I'm missing something. Sorry about that. Hold on, let me see. The argument string can't be the string function. The argument string can be assigned to this function. Okay. Hold on, I think. So this our validator doesn't work directly with this, so we probably need to create a custom one, but because of our time, let's just do it manually. Let's just do it manually because of time. So the string could be that because it requires a string, right? Okay, so for validation, just check if it is empty. Let's see that is empty. Innumerable expression can't be used. Okay. Okay, if it is empty, then let's return name should not be empty. Else, let's just return no. Okay, yeah, I think we can just work with this. Okay, so so the text form field, right? Let me just save that. Has, so let's see where this our validator ends here. Okay, so it has another function or method rather unsaved, right? So what we're going to do in this unsaved, so let's hover on it. So this unsaved, so it creates a form field that contains a text field. So when a controller is specified, initial value must be null and that. So if the controller is null, then the text editing, then the text editor will be constructed and automatically its text will be initialized to the initial value. So basically what we're just going to say is controller dot name, right? Name, sorry, where is our name? Created, because I want to update this value. Where is okay, let me just go to our controller. Yes, this young man. So controller dot name, right? So we want to now just update it. So on save, it should just update that. So that will be equal to the new value. You can actually change this to whatever you want, right? But we need to trim it, right? In case there are white spaces, right? Maybe the person clicked space, we need to trim it. And since it's a name, we can also just go a step further and convert it to uppercase, right? Or you can just leave it at lowercase, right? So that's for the unsaved. And then lastly, on field submitted, yes, yeah. So the form text form widget has a lot of things. So I'm just trying to see if I can introduce you guys to as much widget as possible. So on field submitted, right? So this is just what when you want to actually submit, right? But here we're going to create a function called submit here, a method. And this method is going to take a context, right? Let's just create that. Create a method. Okay, so kind of don't want it to be down. So let's bring it up here. Okay, let's bring that up here. Okay, so what are we going to what are we submitting, or how do we actually now submit, right? So this is basically what we're going to do. First of all, we need to take away the focus, right? We need to take away the focus, which is basically this whole that in turn actually talks also about this your inputs, keyboards, stuff, right? So we say focus scope dot of context dot on focus. So right, so when you want to submit, right, so it removes the focus on this node by moving the primary focus to another node. After that, so we check if the form key, because this could be nullable. So if the form key, if it is not the current state, no, sorry, not context, right? If it's not the current state, dot validates. So if this is not true, right? What we want to do is what? Return. It means you can't actually submit. So this is more like a validation. So it's to just check if the form keys, if you're not in the current state, to just, and the validation is not working. If it doesn't validate, then, just return. That means you can't actually, submit, right? So after, but that's not the case, right? We'll save the current state. We're going to save the current state, and then we'll get to the game screen. So we'll use the get off. We have this get off and to named. So what the get off and to named this thing does is just like a navigation dot pop and push. So it will pop the current name page and then push a new page to the stack in its place, right? So what happens is that the off name pops a page and goes to the next, and then the off and to name goes to the next page and removes the previous one, right? So it will remove the previous one. So that means you actually can't even go back to that, because we are actually going to the distance. So where are we going to? We are going to the game screen. That's where we want to go to. So our routes dot game screen routes. That's where we are going to. So I think this save. Okay. Yeah. So, and then at the same time, we also want to, kind of start the the timer also, right? Want to actually start the timer. So I'm going to first find, because I need access to the controller, and the controller, I did not create it as a global. That's also another way. I didn't create it as a global variable here. We only have the access to the controller here in this part, right? So I'm going to find the question controller, right? And then when I get it, I'll call the start timer to start the code. Okay. So let's just see. Okay, we just have this. Okay. So our welcome screen is done. So let's just kind of do a hot reload, and then let's test it out. So here I'm just going to say I keys, and then click on, let's start. Okay, so that's not working. Let's check our, okay, so we haven't actually initialized, we haven't called the submit in this button. This is just the validation. So we actually haven't done that. So we need to, do that. So by this, this our primary button was actually a what's it called? It's a component, right? A reusable one. So if I want to have, I need a click function, right? Now I could just wrap this with a gesture detector, but that doesn't, it now means I'll now be wrapping, and anytime I call the button, I'll just be wrapping. So I can just wrap it once. So let's go there and do a bit of edit. So on the container, I'm going to wrap it with a, no, sorry, not a builder, widgets, and then gesture detector. So the gesture detector has the on-tap function, which is a void call. It takes a void function, right? So I'm just going to take this as it's here, right? And I'm going to create a final, right? And then pass in on tap here. So I just want to reuse it. So it means that whenever I use the button, I also have access to the function, right? So let's add that here. Okay, and we're good. So I can now just say on tap, right? And I think I'll just use this and then submit, call my submit, and of course it requires a context, and then I'll pass in context. So invalid. Okay, let's take out this const here. Okay, so let's save that. And then let's try. So I'm going to click on let's start. Okay, so it doesn't seem like it's working. So let's be sure. So one of the ways you actually do stuff is to do some debugging stuff, and I'm just going to put a print statement. Let me be sure that print. So when I tap on it, I should print tapping. Let me drop this guy here also. Okay, so let me bring up my terminal. Okay, go to my debug console. So let me reload this. So I want to click on this button. Okay, so it works now actually. It works. Okay, so you can see we have been able to move to the game screen, right? We've been able to move to the game screen. So how many minutes do we have left? Okay. Okay, let's see how much we can do. We'll probably just, I thought we'll be able to round this up, but it's not looking like it, right? It's not looking like it. So I don't know. We have about 15 minutes left, so I don't think we'll be able to round that up today, right? So yeah, I don't think we'll be able to round that up with designing, and then we have the game screen to work on, and then the game status screen also. So this is what we're going to do, right? We'll round it up here. I'm going to send a screenshot of the game screen and the game status screen, right? I'm going to drop that on the channel. So you implement that so that once I come, we'll just move past the design, quickly and go into actual logic. Okay, so that will also help you to try out stuff. I'll give you a bit of hint, right? I'll give you a hint, but I think in the end, I would want to see your approach to the UI design. So this is going to be a task, right? And you make sure to, I'll let you know when to, of course, submission is going to be on Wednesday. I need to get that submission on Wednesday. I'll let you know how to get that across to me, right? Okay, so yeah, let's just round that up here. We won't have enough time to finish up the UI. So we'll just you work on the UI yourself. In the next class, I'm going to do speed UI implementation. So we just finish up the application in our next class. Okay, so yeah, any questions before we call it timeout? Any questions? So let me save what we've done. Git status. Okay, git add. Any questions? Just raise your hand or use the comments chat box. Okay, so in the absence of none, yeah, I just want to commit this. Then okay, so set up model and controllers. So let's just put that and controller class. Okay. Yeah, David, go ahead. Okay, so I'm not
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I wanted to actually design the UI though, but I was working on something else, an e-commerce app. Although I've done the UI, I've implemented some of the functionalities, but then I want to ask, is it possible to have, like, go to your model section here, where you have models.
Where is that? Okay, that should be
Data.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Is it possible to have two different models in one for one application?
Yes, very possible. A
It's
typical
possible.
example is let me give you something. I could have, let's assume a question is with respect to a track. Okay, I could have a model called track, and a track has ID, int ID. A track has a name, which could be Android or whatever, which is a string. So let's just leave it at that, right? And then of course we just implement those final stuff. Yeah, so this my question model can be tied to this track. So for each question, I can say that, okay, fine, for each question is with respect to a particular track. So I can say final, so I'll now say track and then say track, something like this. And then, this can be required for this dot track. Yeah, so this is actually a model inside a model. This question model requires this. So for every question, the question could be from the Android type. So let's assume this, this is a quiz. Let's assume this quiz is just a general KodeCamp quiz. One question could come from UI UX, which is a track. This question could be tied to front end. This question could be tied to back end. Track in itself is a model because it has its own structure, right? It has its name, it has its ID, it has a lot, it could have a lot of things, right? In fact, track in itself, right, just like in your learning management system, track in itself can also have a type that is a model called what, stage, or level, which level could be its own model that has its own structure, right? Whereby a level has an ID, right? Final int ID, and a level has a name, which that name could be level 1, level 2, beginner. So let's just stay the context of KodeCamp, beginner and intermediate level. You understand? So that means so this whole thing now kind of goes down to the point of even this question can be said to have what, a level. So what this means is that for every question that is available, right? It has an ID, it has an answer, it has a question, it has options. It belongs to a particular track and belongs to a particular level. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. It does, because I think I was trying to give functionality to the final, that is the checkout page. So I was not having some kind of errors. I didn't know how to place them, though from the stop page to the cart page, they were working fine. But when I now got to the, because I didn't want to use the same pictures or images for the checkout page. Yes, there was supposed to be different images, so I didn't know how
it's
to.
fine.
All right. Thank you very much. It's clear now. But if I have any other challenges, I'll still let you know.
Sure. You can reach out. Okay,
all right, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's all. So I'm going to send the UI for you guys. You guys should just implement that, and then we should be good to go. In our next class, we should round up this and get into something much more interesting. Okay, so thank you guys very much, and let's have a wonderful week ahead.